The Galactic Council chamber was a vast, imposing structure, its walls lined with holographic banners representing hundreds of civilizations. In the center of the semicircular hall sat the alien delegates, their towering forms shifting uneasily as their luminous eyes fixated on the lone human standing before them. Ambassador Reed, dressed in a crisp suit and tie, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm despite the accusatory stares directed at him. The Supreme Arbiter, a towering being with iridescent piety, clicked its mandibles, its multifaceted eyes narrowing as it addressed the human. Humans, you claim to be a species dedicated to peace and diplomacy. And yet, our reconnaissance has observed your warriors moving freely in attire, blending seamlessly into your population. This is a clear violation of intergalactic warfare conventions. Explain this deception. Reed allowed a small, measured smile to appear on his face as he adjusted his tie. You misunderstand, Supreme Arbiter. Those individuals you observed aren't warriors. They are civilians. A low murmur spread through the assembly as the alien delegates turned to each other, their translators processing the human's words. A reptilian general seated near the arbiter slammed a closed fist against the arm of its chair, its golden eyes narrowing with suspicion. Lies! We have seen your so-called civilians in war zones, engaging our forces with lethal precision. They wield no standard weaponry, wear no identifiable armor, and yet, they fight like your most elite assassins. Entire battalions have fallen at their hands, and not one of them bore any formal rank or designation. Do you expect us to believe they are not trained combatants? Reed's smile did not waver. He took a slow step forward, his polished shoes echoing against the chamber floor. I understand your confusion. But I assure you, those individuals you encountered were, indeed, civilians. The murmur grew into a chorus of hushed whispers as the delegates processed this statement. A pale, ambassador with glistening skin leaned forward, its gills flaring with unease. If what you say is true, then how do you explain the sheer effectiveness of these so-called civilians? We have engaged many species in battle, but never have we encountered a race where ordinary citizens fight as though they have been trained for war their entire lives. Reed chuckled softly, shaking his head as if the answer should have been obvious. That's just how we are. The Supreme Arbiter's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. Elaborate. Reed took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. Humans have evolved on a planet that does not forgive weakness. Every moment of our history has been defined by conflict, struggle, and survival. And like many of the civilizations here, we were not born into a peaceful existence guided by advanced wisdom or benevolent ancestors. We fought for every scrap of progress we made. Our wars, our hardships, our very way of life have shaped us into what we are. And that resilience, that instinct to fight, is not something that belongs only to our soldiers. It is in all of us. The reptilian general scoffed, baring its fangs. You expect us to believe that your entire species is capable of combat. Reed arched an eyebrow. Tell me, General, do your people train their warriors from birth? The general hesitated before nodding. Of course. Only the most dedicated are selected for military service. Reed nodded in understanding. And when your civilians are threatened, when war reaches their homes, the general's nostrils flared. They are evacuated, protected by our forces. Reed let the words hang in the air for a moment before speaking again, his voice calm but firm. Humans don't have that luxury. For most of our history, when war came to us, there was no escape. No armies waiting to shield us. We had to fight, no matter who we were, farmers, merchants, scholars. That instinct never left us. The Supreme Arbiter's eyes gleamed as understanding began to dawn. You are saying that every human is a soldier. Reed shook his head. No, not in the way you define it. We do have professional soldiers, those who dedicate their lives to war. But every human, regardless of their profession, has the capacity to fight. Not because we are trained from birth, but because we must. Because we always have. Silence fell over the chamber as the weight of his words settled over the gathered delegates. The reptilian general's clothes twitched as it recalled battlefield reports, unarmed humans taking down elite warriors with nothing but their hands, their wits, and a level of brutality unseen in any formal military doctrine. The amphibian ambassador's gills flared again, this time in alarm. Then how do we know who among you is dangerous? Reed's smile widened slightly. You don't. A wave of unease spread through the chamber. The supreme arbiter sat back in its seat, observing the human ambassador with renewed wariness. You are an unpredictable species, Ambassador Reed. A dangerous one. Reed gave a polite nod. We prefer resourceful. The supreme arbiter clicked its mandibles again before speaking, its voice heavy with a new understanding. Then it would seem that engaging humanity in war is unwise. Reed's eyes gleamed as he gave a knowing smile. A very wise conclusion. The chamber fell into a tense silence, and for the first time in the Galactic Council's history, the delegates realized that war with humanity would not be fought on their terms. It would not be fought against uniformed soldiers on a battlefield. It would be fought in the shadows, in the streets, in the homes of ordinary men and women who had been fighting for survival since the dawn of their existence. The outer rim cantina was a dimly lit, smoky establishment, filled with the low hum of alien conversations and the occasional burst of laughter or frustration from patrons gambling at holographic tables. The scent of exotic drinks and burnt circuitry from malfunctioning droids lingered in the air, blending with the scent of sweat and cheap synthetic leather. It was the kind of place where deals were made, fights were inevitable, and the week didn't last long. At the bar, a lone human sat on a stool, leaning forward with a drink in hand. He was unremarkable, short brown hair, casual clothing, no visible weapons. He blended into the crowd with an ease that suggested he was just another traveler passing through. His relaxed posture and the lazy way he swirled the amber liquid in his glass gave off the impression of someone who had nothing to worry about. That was his mistake. Or at least, that's what the group of alien mercenaries towering over him believed. The leader of the group, a brute with thick, leathery skin and curved tusks, sneered down at the human. His voice was a deep, guttural growl, tinged with amusement and contempt. You humans are weak. His companions chuckled, their various alien features twisting into smirks. You don't even carry weapons. The human didn't look up. He took a slow sip of his drink, savoring it, before setting the glass down with a soft clink. His fingers tapped lazily against the counter. Weapons, he repeated, his voice calm and, oh, I don't need those. The mercenaries' sneer deepened, interpreting the human's words as either arrogance or stupidity. He reached out with a massive hand, grabbing the human's shoulder in an iron grip. Then you won't mind if we teach you some respect. It happened so fast that the mercenary didn't even register what went wrong. One moment he was standing tall, gripping the human's shoulder, and the next, he was on the ground, his massive form crumpled like a discarded rag. His wrist was twisted at an impossible angle, his fingers spasming in pain. The cantina fell into stunned silence. The human remained seated, still looking completely relaxed. He picked up his drink again and took another slow sip. I really wish you hadn't done that, he muttered, more to himself than to the groaning mercenary on the floor. The rest of the alien mercenaries snapped out of their shock. Van lunged forward, his movements swift and aggressive, a blade glinting in his hand. The human sighed, shifting slightly in his seat. With one fluid motion, he caught the attacker's wrist, twisted it, and forced the alien's own momentum against him, sending him into the bar. The impact was loud, a sickening crunch followed by the clatter of the blade hitting the floor. Another tried to grab him from behind. The human ducked, grabbed the alien's arm, and used the momentum to flip him over his shoulder, sending him crashing into a nearby table. The furniture shattered beneath the weight, and patrons scrambled to get out of the way. The bartender, a grizzled old, with 4 eyes and a lifetime of experience running a cantina on the edge of civilized space, sighed heavily as he wiped out a glass with a rag. Another learning the hard way, huh? The human chuckled, adjusting his sleeves as the last of the mercenaries hesitated, unsure whether to press their attack or cut their losses. They always do, he replied, sounding more amused than anything else. The leaden, still on the floor, clutched his injured wrist and glared up at the human with a mixture of rage and fear. You're military. The human tilted his head, considering the statement. Not really. The mercenary's jaw clenched. Then what the hell are you? The human leaned forward slightly, meeting the alien's gaze with a lazy, knowing smirk. Just a civilian. The silence in the cantina was thick. The mercenaries, or what was left of them, exchanged uneasy glances before slowly backing away. The leaden, humiliated and in pain, spat on the floor before motioning for his crew to leave. As they limped toward the exit, the human casually reached into his pocket, pulled out a few credits, and tossed them onto the bar. For the damages, he said, giving the bartender a small nod. The snorted. You say that like this is the first time someone's broken a table in here. The human laughed, standing up and stretching as if he hadn't just dismantled an entire group of trained killers in under a minute. Fair point. He turned toward the exit, moving with uneasy confidence, and disappeared into the streets of the outer rim. As the doors swung shut behind him, the remaining patrons slowly turned back to their drinks, conversations picking up again, but with a new topic now dominating the whispers. The human had looked so unassuming, so ordinary. No armor, no weapons, no signs of formal military rank. And yet, he had fought like a seasoned warrior. The bartender sighed, shaking his head as he picked up the scattered credits. We'll never learn, he muttered to himself. One of the patrons, a young alien who had been watching from the corner, leaned forward, his expression filled with curiosity and a hint of fear. Who was that? The bartender paused, glancing toward the door before giving a small, knowing smile. Just another human. The battlefield was supposed to be a massacre. The warlords had been certain of it. Their elite strike force had landed on the human colony world of Viesta, no, expecting nothing but frightened civilians and minimal resistance. The plan had been simple: strike hard, establish dominance, and force the colony into submission before the human military could respond. But things had not gone according to plan. The streets of the colony were eerily quiet, the wind carrying the distant echoes of soldiers barking orders as they swept through the settlement. Vehicles smoldered in the early morning light, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of plasma fire. And yet, despite their overwhelming numbers, despite their superior firepower, the advance had stalled. Commandant stood at the center of his tactical formation, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the twin suns. His mandibles clicked in frustration as he surveyed the chaos unfolding before him. His soldiers were supposed to be rounding up defenseless humans by now, but instead, they were being ambushed at every turn. The enemy was unseen, silent figures striking from the shadows, attacking with terrifying precision, and vanishing before his troops could react. A scout stumbled toward him, breathing heavily, his armor dented, his energy rifle depleted. Commandant, the scout gasped, his secondary arms twitching from shock. We've lost contact with strike team Beta. They were advancing through the residential sector when the scout hesitated, his mandibles clicking rapidly in fear. They just disappeared. Eyes narrowed, his irritation mounting. Disappeared? That is impossible. No human colony has the technology to cloak entire squads. The scout swallowed hard. It wasn't technology, sir. Stiffened. That word again. Civilians. These were supposed to be weak, panicked workers, farmers, engineers, not trained fighters. Not warriors. He grabbed the scout by the front of his armor, pulling him close. Explain. The scout shuddered. They're everywhere. They move like ghosts, setting traps, striking in silence. We don't know where they'll hit next. They have no formation, no central command, just groups of them, working together in ways we can't predict. Every time we think we have them, they're already behind us. We're being hunted, sir. Released him, his mind racing. How? The humans had no military presence here, no official planetary defenses beyond a few automated turrets. Yet his elite warriors were being taken apart as if they were rookies on their first deployment. He turned to his calm officer. Patch me through to all squads. Now. The officer fumbled with the console, close tapping rapidly against the interface. Static filled the comms, followed by panicked voices. This is Unit 6. We're under attack, repeat, we're. The transmission cut off. Squad Theta has been wiped out. We need reinforcements. Where the hell are they coming from? I thought they were unarmed. Mandibles clenched as he listened to the chaos unfold. The humans weren't fighting like a military force. There was no clear pattern to their assault, no predictable maneuvers, just brutal, relentless strikes that left his warriors disoriented and demoralized. A deep explosion rumbled in the distance, followed by a bright flare of fire lighting up the Kalani skyline. Another squad, gone. Turned toward his lieutenants, his mind racing through possible solutions. He could call for an air-orbiter strike, level the Kalani entirely, but that would mean admitting that his forces had been bested by an unarmed population. That was unacceptable. A sudden movement caught his eye. A single human, a woman dressed in civilian clothing, darted between two ruined structures. She carried no visible weapons, no armor, nothing that should have made her a threat. And yet, as his soldiers turned their attention toward her, she vanished into the rubble like a shadow. Seconds later, another explosion rocked the street as an unseen charge detonated beneath one of their transports. Fists clenched. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained. And yet, they fought as if war was in their very nature. He took a slow, deep breath and activated his personal calm device. To all units, regroup and pull back to the landing zone. Now. His officers snapped their heads toward him in shock. Commandant, we still have. We leave, growled, his tone allowing no room for argument. He turned his gaze back toward the Kalani, scanning the ruined streets, the shattered buildings, the empty windows that could be hiding 100 unseen enemies. There was no way to fight an enemy like this. Not when every single one of them, soldier A or not, was willing to fight. Not when every street could be a trap. Every shadow could hide death. Every civilian could be a killer in disguise. As his remaining troops moved quickly toward the landing zone, he cast one final glance at the Kalani behind him. It had been meant to be an easy conquest, a simple raid. Instead, it had been a lesson. A brutal, humiliating lesson. The war was over. At least, that's what the galaxy had been told. The invasion had been repelled, their fleets shattered, their warlords humiliated. Reports flooded across the systems, confirming what many had hoped: the humans had won. But not just won. They had obliterated the enemy in ways no one had anticipated. It was not through overwhelming firepower, nor through superior numbers. It was through something far more terrifying: their people. On the edges of known space, in a quiet, dimly lit council chamber aboard an observation station, a meeting was taking place, when that should never have been necessary. Gathered around a circular table were representatives of the most powerful species in the galaxy, each one carrying the weight of their civilizations on their shoulders. Holographic displays flickered in front of them, replaying the same haunting footage over and over. Grainy recordings of battles fought in the shadows, civilians moving like specters through war zones, striking with the precision of trained assassins and vanishing before their enemies could react. High Chancellor of the Republic cleared his throat, his deep, resonant voice filling the chamber. We are gathered here today to address a matter of grave concern. His reptilian eyes flicked toward the other council members, his gaze unreadable. The war with humanity is over, but the implications of what we have witnessed linger. A heavy silence followed his words, before Ambassador of the leaned forward, his translucent skin shifting with nervous energy. What we have witnessed is unnatural. His elongated fingers tapped against the table as he pulled up a still image on the holographic display. It showed a human colony, untouched by war, yet standing over the bodies of their conquerors. The invasion should have been an overwhelming success. And yet, an entire fleet of elite warriors was undone by civilians. He turned toward the others. This is unprecedented. A low growl rumbled from General of the Kryn Dominion, his fur bristling as he spoke. We have always believed humans to be dangerous, yes. Their military prowess is known. But this. His claws tapped impatiently against the table as he exhaled sharply. This was something else. Their civilians fought like trained operatives. No command structure. No chain of command. And yet, they fought as if they had spent their lives preparing for war. His yellow eyes narrowed. How? For a moment, no one spoke. The recordings played again, humans setting traps with the ease of seasoned guerrilla fighters, ambushing soldiers with makeshift weapons, disabling armored units with explosives crafted from household materials. They were untrained, unarmed, and yet they fought as if war was simply in their blood. Finally, Counselor of the Confederation, who had been silent until now, exhaled slowly. Perhaps, she said carefully, we are looking at this the wrong way. The others turned to her, waiting. She studied the image in front of her, a distant look in her dark eyes. We assume that because we have distinct warrior castes, trained soldiers, and clear military hierarchies, that humans must function the same way. But what if we have misunderstood them entirely? Leaned forward. Other species require training, conditioning, years of preparation before we send our people to war. She gestured at the screen. But humans, they do not. Chancellor, expression darkened. You are suggesting that all humans are born ready for war. Hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Yes. General broke it with a sharp bark of disbelief. That is absurd. A species cannot function like that. There must be soldiers and civilians, as there are in every other civilization. Gaze didn't waver. And yet, we have no explanation for what we've seen. No species, in the history of this galaxy, has exhibited this level of adaptability under combat conditions. No species has been able to weaponize their own population without centralized training. She tapped the screen, where a human, a simple farmer, according to reports, could be seen taking down a trained warrior with nothing but a piece of sharpened metal and a broken chair leg. And yet, here they are. Chancellor shifted uneasily. What you are suggesting means that humans do not have civilians. Only soldiers in disguise. General exhaled, his posture tense. So what do we do? His voice was lower now, more cautious. If we accept that humans are all, in some capacity, soldiers, what does that mean for the rest of us? Ambassador, fingers curled against the table. It means, he said quietly, that we must never again allow ourselves to make them our enemy. Chancellor, gaze hardened. Then it is decided. From this day forward, we recognize the unspoken truth. Humanity is the most dangerous force in the galaxy, not because of their weapons, nor their technology, but because war is woven into their very being. He looked around the table, making sure every representative understood the weight of his words. We will ensure peace with them at all costs. As the council members solemnly nodded in agreement, the holographic screens continued to play the footage, the eerie, haunting reminder of a truth they could no longer ignore. Humans did not need to wear uniforms. They did not need to be trained in academies or sworn into service. Because every human, no matter where they came from, no matter what life they had lived,